My name is Brenda Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, and I built Horizon Couture with my own hands, turning it from a small idea into one of the most talked about fashion brands in the industry. On paper, my life looks like the definition of success. But on the night of my sister's birthday, none of those accomplishments mattered. The moment I stepped through the doors of that party, it felt like everything I had built meant absolutely nothing to the people who were supposed to be my family. The room was bright, filled with music and chatter, but the atmosphere around me turned cold almost instantly. Instead of welcoming me, they quietly guided me to a lonely corner near the gift table, the spot where guests rarely lingered, as if I were someone who had wandered in by mistake rather than someone who belonged there. Then came the look, that slow smirk that carried years of judgment behind it, and the words that followed were sharp enough to leave a mark. Apparently, I wasn't successful enough to sit with the rest of them. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I didn't even bother raising my voice. Instead, I calmly pulled out my phone, opened a message, and typed a few simple words. One short text. That was all it took. Within seconds, the wheels were already in motion, and the power to shake the entire evening rested quietly in my hand. Exactly 30 minutes later, the laughter that once filled the room had transformed into confusion and panic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, smiles faded. The celebration they had imagined would shine brightly all night was already beginning to crumble piece by piece. And the truth is, that moment was only the beginning of what was about to unfold. So tell me honestly, do you think I crossed the line, or do you think it was finally time for me to stand up for myself after years of being treated like I didn't matter? Share your opinion in the comments. Hit the subscribe button if you want to hear the rest of the story, and don't forget to share it so others can decide where they stand. It all really started one quiet evening while I was alone in my kitchen. My phone suddenly lit up on the counter, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced over casually at first, but the name glowing on the screen immediately made me pause. Pamela Reed, my older sister. We hadn't spoken in months, and the last conversation we had ended with her reminding me, very clearly, that I would never meet the standards our family expected. My thumb hovered over the decline button for a moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, but curiosity has a way of pulling you in, and before I could talk myself out of it, I answered the call. Brenda. Pamela's voice came through the phone, bright and confident, but underneath it was that same old layer of condescension I remembered so well. I'm having my birthday party next month at the Crestview Hotel. You're invited. The way she said it didn't feel warm or sincere. It sounded more like she was checking a name off a list. I stayed silent, tightening my grip on the phone as I waited for her to continue. It's on the 20th at 7 in the evening, she added casually, and it's going to be a big event, so try not to embarrass us. I could practically picture the expression on her face while she said it, that familiar, smug smile she had perfected over the years, the one she'd used since childhood whenever she wanted to remind me that she believed she was better. I took a slow breath and kept my voice calm. Why invite me at all, Pamela? I asked quietly. She let out a short laugh, quick and dismissive. You're still family, Brenda, she replied. Just show up and behave. Before I could respond, the line went dead. She had already hung up. I stood there for several seconds, staring at the dark screen of my phone, my thoughts racing. Family. That word felt hollow. Growing up, my parents, my dad and my mom, had always placed Pamela on a pedestal. She was their pride, the daughter who perfectly matched the image they wanted to show the world. Meanwhile, no matter what I accomplished, I was somehow always the disappointment in their eyes. I'm Brenda Mitchell, 35 years old, and I run Horizon Couture, a fashion brand I built entirely on my own. To the outside world, I'm someone who turned determination into success. But to my family, I'm still the same girl who somehow never quite belonged. I sank down onto the couch, letting Pamela's words replay in my mind.
The Crestview Hotel wasn't just any venue. It was one of San Diego's most exclusive locations, the kind of place where wealthy investors gathered, where important deals were made over expensive glasses of wine. Pamela's party wasn't just a birthday celebration. It was an opportunity for her to display her flawless life in front of everyone, while quietly reminding me where she believed I stood. I had attended enough family gatherings to know exactly how the evening would unfold. I would be pushed to the side, barely acknowledged, maybe offered a few polite smiles filled with pity. Memories surfaced immediately, like my father's retirement party, where I stood in the background the entire night because no one bothered to introduce me, or the charity gala where my mother waved me away and asked me to help manage the coat rack like I was part of the staff. I was tired of being invisible. A part of me wanted to decline the invitation entirely. Life in my own world was peaceful, In my company, my decisions mattered and my voice carried weight. But another part of me, the stubborn part that had helped me build Horizon Couture from nothing, refused to let them keep writing the story of who I was. I had worked through endless nights, sacrificed sleep, and pushed through obstacles most people never even saw. I was not the failure they insisted I was, and I was finished allowing them to treat me like one. If I went to Pamela's party, it wouldn't be to quietly fade into the background again. I would go to face them directly, to stand there in the same room and meet their judgment without backing down. I grabbed a pen from the table and wrote the date on a small sticky note, pressing it firmly onto the refrigerator door. My determination settled in slowly but firmly. I didn't know exactly how the evening at the Crestview would unfold, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't stay silent this time. When the night of Pamela's birthday finally arrived, I stepped out of my car and paused for a moment outside the entrance. I smoothed the fabric of my black Horizon Couture dress, the design sleek and confident, created to draw attention the moment someone walked into a room. My heels clicked against the pavement as I approached the entrance of the Crestview Hotel. The building glowed under the city lights, its lobby buzzing with the quiet elegance of San Diego's elite guests arriving for the event. I took a slow breath, steadying myself before stepping inside. This wasn't simply a birthday party.
It was my chance to confront the family who had spent years treating me like I didn't matter. Inside, the ballroom was alive with movement. Conversations overlapped as guests mingled across the room, glasses clinking together in casual toasts, while laughter echoed through the elegant space. Men dressed in tailored suits and women sparkling in elaborate gowns filled the hall with an effortless sense of wealth and confidence. Near the entrance, a staff member holding a clipboard stepped forward to stop me. "Name, please," she asked in a quick, professional tone. "Brenda Mitchell," I answered calmly. She scanned the list in front of her, her eyes pausing for a brief moment before she pointed toward the far end of the room. "Your table is over there," she said, directing me toward the back. I followed her gesture and immediately felt my stomach tighten. The table was tucked away near a tall stack of gift boxes wrapped in silver foil, almost hidden from the rest of the room. A single place card with my name rested on the table. No one else had been seated there. No one else had been seated there. I slowly sat down, my purse resting tightly in my hands as I looked across the ballroom. The main tables at the front were filled with guests chatting comfortably, enjoying drinks and laughter under the warm lights. That was when I noticed Pamela moving through the crowd. She wore a striking crimson gown that caught the light with every step she took. Her smile looked polished and perfect as she greeted guests, shaking hands and accepting compliments. When her eyes finally landed on me across the room, she changed direction immediately and began walking toward my table with slow, confident steps. Her expression hardened as she reached me. "Brenda," she said loudly enough that several nearby guests turned their heads to look, "you actually showed up." I forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss it, Pamela." She leaned closer, her voice cutting. "Let's be clear, you're not successful enough to sit with the important guests. That's why you're here." Her words stung like a slap, and a few nearby guests glanced away, avoiding my gaze. Pamela turned back to the crowd, her laughter sharp as she rejoined her circle. My face burned, the humiliation sinking in. I looked around, hoping for a hint of kindness. But then I saw Dad and Mom moving through the room. Dad's suit was crisp, Mom's pearls gleaming. I stood, expecting some acknowledgement, but Mom's eyes flicked over me like I was a stranger. "Brenda," she said coldly, "don't ruin Pamela's night." Dad barely glanced my way. "Keep to yourself," he muttered, before they joined a group of older guests who exuded wealth and power. I sank back into my seat, my hands shaking with a mix of hurt and anger. Their dismissal wasn't new, but it hit harder here, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my worth. I was 35, leading a fashion empire that dressed some of the biggest names, yet to them I was invisible. The gift boxes beside me felt like a deliberate jab, a reminder of where they thought I belonged. I could have walked out, left their judgment behind, but something held me there. Anger, pride, or maybe both. I'd spent too long fighting to be seen, and I wasn't going to run now. Then I noticed a man join Pamela, his arms slipping around her waist. It was Stephen Brooks, her fiancé, tall, with a smug grin and an air of entitlement. They glanced at me, Pamela whispering something that made him chuckle. My jaw tightened. They thought they could humiliate me in front of this elite crowd, parade their superiority like it was a game.
My fingers tightened around my phone, the sting of Pamela's words still burning. I couldn't just sit there swallowing their insults like I had so many times before. I stood up, my heels steady despite the anger coursing through me, and made my way toward the center of the ballroom. The Crestview Hotel's elite crowd parted slightly, their murmurs fading as I approached Pamela, who was laughing with a group of guests. Stephen stood beside her, his arms still around her waist. Dad and Mom were nearby, chatting with a couple in expensive suits. I stopped a few feet away, my voice calm but firm. "Pamela," I said loud enough to draw attention, "we need to talk." Pamela turned, her smile faltering for a split second before she regained her composure. "Brenda," she said, her tone dripping with mockery, "what's this about? Don't make a scene." The guests around us shifted, their eyes darting between us. I didn't flinch. "You think it's okay to treat me like I'm nothing?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. "To shove me in a corner and tell everyone I don't belong?"
Her eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Stephen stepped forward, his grin smug. "Look, Brenda," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You're kind of an outsider here. This is for people who've actually made something of themselves." His words hit like a punch, and a few guests gasped, their whispers spreading. I turned to Dad and Mom, hoping for some defense, but Mom just shook her head. "Brenda, stop this," she said coldly. "You're embarrassing yourself." Dad crossed his arms, his face stern. "Pamela's right. This isn't your place. Go back to your table." Their words cut deeper than Pamela's, deeper than anything I'd felt before. My own parents siding with her, dismissing me in front of a room full of strangers. I stood there, my heart pounding, the weight of years of rejection crashing down. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. They thought they could humiliate me, reduce me to nothing, and walk away unscathed. I took a step closer to Pamela, my eyes locked on hers. "You've always done this," I said, my voice low but carrying. "You pushed me down to make yourself feel bigger. And you too?" I turned to Dad and Mom. "You let her. You've always let her." Pamela laughed, but it was forced, her confidence cracking. "Oh, Brenda, don't be so dramatic," she said, glancing at the crowd for support. "You're just jealous because you'll never be on our level." Stephen nodded, his smirk widening. "Exactly. Stick to your little projects and leave the real success to us." That was it, the final straw. I'd spent years building Horizon Couture, pouring my life into it, and they thought they could dismiss it as a little project. My anger turned to resolve, cold and sharp. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. I looked at Pamela, then Stephen, then my parents, their faces a mix of disdain and amusement. "You think you know me?" I said, my voice steady, "but you don't. You have no idea what I'm capable of." The room grew quieter, the tension thick. Pamela opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I'm done letting you walk over me. You'll see what happens when you underestimate me." I turned, my heart racing, but my steps deliberate, and walked back toward my table. The crowd's whispers followed me, but I didn't care. I'd spent too long shrinking under their judgment, trying to prove myself to people who'd never see my worth. My phone was still in my hand, and as I sat down, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let their words break me, not anymore. They'd pushed me too far, and now they were going to face the consequences. I sat back at my corner table. My fingers moved quickly, pulling up a message to Nancy, my lead negotiator at Horizon Couture. "Cancel the $5.5 million deal with Brooks Retail Group. Effective immediately, no discussion." I hit send, my heart pounding with a mix of defiance and satisfaction. Stephen thought he could belittle me, unaware that his company was banking on a contract with mine, a contract I just obliterated with one tap. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and walked toward the center of the ballroom. The Crestview Hotel's elite crowd was still buzzing, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. Pamela stood near the main table, laughing with a group of guests, Stephen at her side, his smug grin intact. Dad and Mom were nearby, nodding along to some wealthy couple's story. I stopped a few feet away, my voice clear and steady. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, loud enough to cut through the chatter. Heads turned, conversations faltering. Pamela's eyes locked on mine, her smile freezing. "I have something to say." The room grew quiet, dozens of eyes on me. I took a deep breath, my resolve unshakable. "My name is Brenda Mitchell," I began, my voice carrying across the ballroom. "For years, my family, Pamela, Dad, Mom, has treated me like I don't belong, like I'm nothing. Tonight, they made it clear, shoving me to a corner table and calling me an outsider. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, their whispers starting to spread. Pamela's face tightened, but I didn't stop. "But here's the truth you don't know," I continued, my gaze shifting to Stephen. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Couture, a fashion empire I built from the ground up. And you, Stephen, just lost a $5.5 million deal with my company because you thought you could humiliate me. The room erupted in gasps, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Stephen's grin vanished, his face paling. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, stepping forward. "You're lying." I held up my phone, showing the sent message to Nancy. "Check with your team," I said coolly.
The contract with Brooks Retail Group is done. I canceled it 10 seconds ago. Pamela's jaw dropped, her eyes darting between me and Stephen. "Brenda, what have you done?" she hissed, her voice trembling with panic. Dad stepped forward, his face red. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You're ruining everything." Mom clutched his arm, her expression a mix of shock and anger. "How could you do this to Pamela?" she demanded. I didn't flinch. "You did this," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "All of you. You thought you could push me down, treat me like I'm less, and get away with it. Not anymore." The guests were whispering furiously now, some pulling out their phones, likely checking the news of the deal's collapse. Stephen fumbled for his own phone, his hands shaking as he dialed. "This can't be real," he muttered, his voice cracking. Pamela grabbed his arm, her face flushed. "Fix this, Stephen," she snapped. But he just shook his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising. I built Horizon Couture from nothing, while my family told me I'd never amount to anything. I'm done letting them define me. This is who I am, a woman who doesn't need their approval to succeed. The room was silent for a moment. Then a few guests clapped, their applause growing louder. Others looked at Pamela and my parents, their expressions shifting from admiration to doubt. Pamela's face was a mask of fury, but she stayed silent, her usual confidence shattered. Dad and Mom stood frozen, their authority crumbling in front of their elite friends. I walked back to my table, my heart racing, but my steps firm. The weight of their judgment was gone, replaced by a sense of power I'd never felt before. I'd shown them who I was, and I wasn't done yet. The applause from the crowd faded, but the tension in the ballroom hung heavy. I stood by my table, watching the chaos I'd unleashed unfold. Pamela's face was a storm of fury and panic, her eyes darting between me and Stephen, who was frantically scrolling through his phone. "This isn't happening," he muttered, his voice shaking as he dialed a number. "Nancy, it's Stephen," he said, his tone urgent. "Tell me the deal's still on." I couldn't hear Nancy's response, but Stephen's face turned ashen, his jaw tightening. He hung up, staring at Pamela with wide eyes. "It's gone," he whispered. "She canceled it. The whole $5.5 million contract gone." Pamela spun toward me, her hands clenched into fists. "Brenda, how could you?" she snapped, her voice loud enough to draw more stares. "You're destroying everything we've worked for." Her words were desperate, a far cry from the smug confidence she'd worn all night. I met her gaze unflinching. "You destroyed this, Pamela," I said coolly. "You thought you could humiliate me and walk away. Not this time." The guests nearby leaned in, their whispers growing louder, phones already buzzing with the news of the deal's collapse. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Brenda, you've gone too far," he said, his voice low but sharp. "This is Pamela's night, and you're making a spectacle." Mom grabbed his arm, her expression frantic. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, her voice trembling. "Why can't you just behave?" Their words stung, but I was done letting them hurt me. "Behave?" I shot back, my voice steady. "You mean stay quiet while you let Pamela treat me like dirt? I'm done with that." Before they could respond, a man in a sharp navy suit approached, his presence commanding the room's attention. "Brenda Mitchell?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. I turned, recognizing him instantly. Edward Pierce, a prominent San Diego investor I'd met at a fashion summit last year. "It's good to see you again," he said, offering a warm smile. I didn't expect to find the CEO of Horizon Couture here, especially after that speech. He glanced at Pamela and Stephen, then back at me. "Your work in sustainable fashion is remarkable. We've been following your company's growth." The room fell silent, the guests' eyes shifting from Edward to my family. Pamela's face reened, her composure crumbling. Stephen looked like he'd been punched, his phone still clutched in his hand. Dad and Mom exchanged uneasy glances, their authority unraveling. "You know her?" Pamela asked, her voice strained. Edward nodded, unfazed. "Of course," he said. "Brent is a leader in the industry. Her designs are worn by some of the biggest names in Hollywood. I'm surprised you didn't mention it." His tone was polite, but the implication was clear. He'd exposed their ignorance in front of their elite crowd.
Pamela forced a smile, but it was brittle. "Well, Brenda's always been private," she said, her words faltering. Stephen tried to recover, stepping forward. "This is just a misunderstanding," he said, his voice tight. "The deal can be fixed." But Edward raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "From what I heard, that deal's dead," he said, glancing at me. "And knowing Brenda's reputation, I'd say she made the right call." The guests murmured, some nodding in agreement, their respect for me growing, while my family's credibility sank. Dad tried to salvage the moment, his voice booming. "This is a family matter," he said, addressing the crowd. "Let's not blow it out of proportion." But his words fell flat, the guests' attention fixed on me. Mom pulled at his sleeve, whispering, "George, stop. They're all watching." Their perfect image, the one they'd spent years crafting, was crumbling, and I could see the panic in their eyes. For the first time, I felt the tables turn. They weren't in control anymore. I stood tall, Edward's words echoing in my mind. "Thank you, Edward," I said, my voice clear. "I appreciate your support." I turned to Pamela, Stephen, Dad, and Mom, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. "You underestimated me," I said, my tone firm. "And now everyone here knows it." I walked away, leaving them in the center of the ballroom, their whispers and stares following me. I'd done what I came to do. 3 days after the party, I sat at a corner table in a quiet San Diego coffee shop, stirring my latte, waiting for Pamela. She texted me the day before, her message short and formal. "We need to talk, please." I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to say what had been building inside me for years. The bell above the door chimed, and Pamela walked in, her usual polish replaced by a tense, almost fragile demeanor. She spotted me and approached, her steps hesitant, a far cry from the confident stride she'd had at the Crestview Hotel. "Brenda," Pamela said, sliding into the chair across from me, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I didn't expect things to go so far." Her eyes darted to the table, avoiding mine. I stayed silent, letting her continue. "What happened at the party? I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for it to escalate like that." Her apologies sounded rehearsed, like she was trying to salvage her image rather than genuinely regret her actions. I leaned back, my expression calm but unyielding. "Sorry for what, Pamela?" I asked, my tone sharp. "For humiliating me in front of everyone, or for thinking you could keep me in your shadow forever?" She flinched, her hands fidgeting with her purse. "I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know you were who you are. The CEO thing, the deal, it caught us off guard." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you didn't bother to know?" I said. "You, Dad, Mom, all of you decided I was a failure without ever asking what I'd built." Pamela's face tightened, but she pressed on. "We can fix this," she said, leaning forward. "Let's put the past behind us. You're family, Brenda. We don't have to lose each other." Her words hit a nerve, not because they were sincere, but because they echoed the same empty promises I'd heard growing up. Family. The word felt hollow after years of their dismissal. I thought of the times I'd reached out, hoping for their support, only to be brushed aside. Pamela's apologies now weren't about me. They were about her fear of losing face, of dealing with the fallout from the party. I took a sip of my coffee, studying myself. "Pamela," I said, my voice firm, "I'm done with this family. I'm done with your games. Dad's lectures, Mom's silence. You don't get to apologize and expect me to come running back." Pamela's eyes widened, her composure cracking. "You can't mean that," she said, her voice rising. "You're really going to walk away from us after everything?" I met her gaze unflinching. "Everything?" I repeated. "You mean the years of being ignored, belittled, and pushed aside?" "Yes, I'm walking away, and you'll feel the consequences of what you've done." I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. "Your perfect world is falling apart, Pamela. The party showed everyone who you really are."
"People are talking, and they're not on your side anymore." Her face pallid, her hands trembling. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I made a mistake, Brenda. We all did." I shook my head. "A mistake is forgetting my birthday. What you did, what all of you did, was deliberate. You chose to treat me like I was nothing, and now you're paying for it." I thought of the whispers at the party, Edward's recognition, the way their carefully curated image had crumbled. Stephen's company was reeling from the canceled deal, and their social standing had taken a hit. They'd underestimated me, and it was costing them. Pamela opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small, stripped of the superiority she'd always worn like armor. I stood, picking up my purse. "This is the last time we'll have this conversation," I said, my tone final. "I've built my life without you, and I'm stronger for it. Goodbye, Pamela." I walked out of the coffee shop, the bell chiming behind me. A weight lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. They'd lost their hold on me, and I was ready to move forward. Months after walking away from Pamela in that coffee shop, I stood in my office at Horizon Couture's San Diego headquarters, watching the city skyline through the window. My company had just landed a major partnership with a global retailer, a deal that dwarfed the one I'd canceled with Stephen's firm. The press was buzzing, calling Horizon Couture a trailblazer in sustainable fashion. I'd spent years building this empire, proving my worth to a world that didn't always see me. Now I was living on my own terms, free from the weight of my family's judgment. I hadn't spoken to Pamela, Dad, or Mom since that day at the coffee shop. The silence was liberating. I'd heard through industry contacts that their perfect world was unraveling. Pamela's social circle had shrunk, her reputation tarnished after the party. Guests like Edward, who'd once admired her, now spoke of her with pity, whispering about how she'd misjudged her own sister. Stephen's company, Brooks Retail Group, was struggling to recover from the $5.5 million deal I'd pulled. Investors had lost confidence, and his name no longer carried the weight it once did. Dad and Mom, who'd always banked on their status in San Diego's elite, found their invitations to exclusive events drying up. Their image, so carefully crafted, had cracked under the truth I'd exposed. I didn't gloat over their downfall, but I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing they were facing the consequences of their actions. For years, they'd dismissed me, called me less than, and assumed I'd never rise above their expectations. But I had. I'd built something real, something mine, without their approval. Every milestone, every new collection, every headline about Horizon Couture reminded me that my worth didn't depend on their validation. I'd learned to value myself, not through their eyes, but through my own. Nancy, my lead negotiator, had been by my side through it all. She'd handled the fallout from the canceled deal with precision, ensuring Horizon Couture came out stronger. Edward had reached out too, offering to connect me with new investors impressed by my resolve. Their support and the loyalty of my team showed me what real respect looked like. It wasn't about blood ties or social status. It was about recognizing someone's worth and treating them accordingly. Looking back, I realized the party at the Crestview Hotel wasn't just a turning point. It was a reckoning. I'd walked in as the sister they ignored, the daughter they underestimated, and left as Brenda Mitchell's CEO, a woman who knew her value. The lesson was clear. Disrespect comes with a cost. Pamela, Stephen, Dad, and Mom learned that the hard way, losing the influence they'd taken for granted. I didn't need to fight them anymore. I'd already won by choosing myself. As I sat at my desk reviewing the latest designs, I felt a sense of peace. The past was behind me, and my future was wide open. I'd built a life that reflected who I was, not who they wanted me to be, and that was enough.